Hey, Penny. Hello.
Good evening, Tom.
I'd like to call the meeting to order. If we could stand for the pledge.
Allegiance to the flag.
I'd like to welcome everyone to the January regular meeting of the District 94 Board of Education. Mission statement, please.
Community High School strives to promote and provide growth experiences in learning, leadership, and living.
Thank you, Rich. Board protocols.
Board members will be judicious in their use of electronic communications with respect to district business and understand that most electronic communication is subject to the Freedom of Information Act and as such can be made public. B, in compliance with the Open Meetings Act, board members will not reply to all to any district email. C, a board member may discuss district business in person or by phone or email with only one other board member at a time.
Thank you, Lynn. Roll call, please.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Ms. Casey Mayer.
Here.
Ms. Doremus.
Present.
Ms. Munoz. Here. Mr. Nagel.
Present.
Mr. Sake.
Present.
Mr. Zuniga.
Here.
Okay, that brings us to Student of the Month.
Our first student of the month is Melanie Koss. West Chicago Community High School has selected Melanie Koss of West Chicago as Student of the Month for November 2022. Melanie was selected by her teacher, who said, "She is motivated to do well and has the potential to become a future leader and policymaker. Melanie has an eagerness to work hard and a desire to become a lawyer. In the 19 years I've been an educator, she is in the top 10% of students, not only in academics, but also in regards to work ethic, communication skills, integrity, leadership, and positivity." A senior, Melanie has been on high honor roll for all but one semester of her high school career, earning a cumulative weighted grade point average of 5.049. She is a member of the National Foreign Language Honor Society, has a seal of biliteracy, as well as academic excellence in mathematics. Melanie has been involved in Interact Club, Student Council, and the Young Adult Advisory Council at West Chicago Public Library. She also serves as a student ambassador, a ROAR director, and on Women's Leadership Executive Board. Outside of the school, Melanie gives back to her community through We Go Together for Kids events, monthly visits to Feed My Starving Children, Rise Against Hunger, and the JDRF Foundation supporting individuals with type 1 diabetes. She also assists Lehman Middle School and the West Chicago Community High School AVID program with translating. Additionally, Melanie offers after-school tutoring in the subjects of math, history, and Spanish. When asked about her favorite high school memory, Melanie said, "Being selected as the Speaker of the House for the government's 57th legislative session was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. Having the opportunity to comprehend and hear divergent ideologies was astonishingly distinctive from other events during my high school career." Melanie has this advice for future Wildcats: enjoy your last years before entering the real world. Your high school journey will conclude faster than you think. Therefore, balance your social and school life, read, educate yourself on topics you dislike, party, join a club, and get involved. WeGo is a place to grow, and they have all the tools you need, but it's you who initiates the interest. After graduation, Melanie plans to double major in political science and history education to either become an educator and/or immigration attorney. Congratulations. Next, we have Jack Riconoscuto. West Chicago Community High School has selected Jack Riconoscuto of West Chicago as Student of the Month for December 2022. He was selected by his teacher, who said, "Jack is all things West Chicago. I lost track of all the things Jack is involved in: math team, student council, marching band, WeGo Global, student ambassador, etc. He is almost single-handedly responsible for the existence of the robotics team. He was our team captain last year and a great representative when interacting with other teams. He is always helpful, courteous, cheerful, and highly responsible. This is a student that has a passion for mathematics and is a great leader in our school building." A senior, Jack has been on high honor roll every semester, earning a cumulative weighted grade point average of 5.541. He is a member of the National Honor Society, National Spanish Honor Society, Music Honor Society, an Illinois State Scholar, AP Scholar with Distinction, Blue Ribbon for Math, and a U.S. Representative Sean Caston STEM Scholar. Jack is a drum major for marching band, vice president of student council, and an active member of WeGo Global, Interact Club, and Book Club. He is also a student ambassador and the team captain for both math team and the robotics team. Jack volunteers as a robotics summer camp leader, WeGo Frosty Fest, and as an election judge. He also works as an instructor for Mathanasium, helping kids of all ages solve math problems from multiple different directions. When asked about his favorite high school memory, Jack said, "My favorite high school memory is probably when I qualified for the state math team competition my freshman year. Mr. Volks isn't very good at hiding things, and it was really funny watching him try to trick us into thinking he had something boring to tell us, but even knowing that something exciting was coming, it was still exhilarating." Jack has this advice for future Wildcats. "I suggest that you make your passions loud and clear. WeGo is such a diverse and vibrant community that there's bound to be other people interested in the same things as you. And being vocal about what you love is a good way to find those people. Life is more fun if you do fun things, so find people to do them with." After graduation, Jack will attend Northwestern University. While his major is undecided, he knows he will pursue something that involves problem solving. Congratulations, Jack.
Well done, Melanie and Jack. And that brings us to good news of the district.
Right. Want to take these now? West Chicago Community High School's Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America, FCCLA, hosted their annual food drive this past holiday season. Each November, FCCLA fulfills their mission of giving back to the community while gaining leadership skills. Throughout the month of November, all WeGo students were encouraged to bring in non-perishable items to donate to a local food pantry. This year, FCCLA chose Northern Illinois Food Bank in Geneva to donate items to. The Northern Illinois Food Bank serves neighbors in 13 counties and provides 250,000 meals per day to families. This year, FCCLA organized a competition through Den Time to encourage students to represent their den while helping the community. This resulted in nearly 1,000 items being donated. FCCLA officers then inventoried and tracked all items donated. All items were delivered to the food bank in December by FCCLA officers and their advisors, Mrs. Brittany Bauer and Mrs. Angela Mullins. We are pleased to recognize the 5 officers of FCCLA for their leadership, dedication, and willingness to give back to their community. The FCCLA officers are Nathaniel Bove, Alejandra Duran, Eileen Mondegron, Margaret Pylan, and Alyssa Shulpaki. Congratulations, everyone. Thank you.
Congratulations and well done. And that brings us to public participation. This is the portion of our meeting where any member of the public can address the Board of Education on any topic. We welcome your comments and will carefully listen to your concerns. We will not be able to engage in a dialogue during public participation, but when appropriate, we will direct the administration to follow up. Presentations are limited to no more than 5 minutes per person, with a total time limit of 30 minutes for public participation. Personal charges or complaints against individual employees, volunteers, or students of the district should not be initiated during public comment. At this point, I have not received any public comment cards, but we do have 2 electronically submitted bits of public comment. So the first one is from Crystal Nolandriani, and the subject is TIF 2 referendum question. Hi, I am writing in support of the board voting in favor of placing a referendum question on the ballot in April, raising awareness to TIF 2. If the board finds themselves in agreement, we implore you to submit a referendum question for the upcoming spring election that will take place on April 4th, 2023. Not one of the residents I have talked to in my neighborhood had heard of TIF 2. Residents need to know what is happening in their community with their tax dollars. There is too much at stake, and a large portion of the community is in the dark. If this TIF 2 goes through, it will take $4 million of District 94's tax dollars and $9 million from Winfield School District 34. This TIF 2 is structured so that new tax revenue funding would go towards the rebuild of Winfield's Town Hall. Taking any amount of educational tax dollars and using it towards municipal purposes should be wrong, and to this magnitude, it would be irreparable. Generations of students will suffer from this loss. On behalf of my family and my community, we ask that you vote in favor of this referendum. Thank you, Crystal Nolandriani. And the second one is from Kirsten DeJohn, and it is an exact duplicate of the original one. So basically a seconding of everything that Crystal put in hers. At this point, is there any other public comment? Hearing none, that brings us to reports and information. Superintendent's report.
Good evening and Happy New Year. For my report, first I'd like to report out on the FOIAs. The district received 2 FOIA requests. The first FOIA request was from Cheryl Moore. Ms. Moore's request was for the actual items and or service under operation and maintenance of plant services that were included in the $1,098,204 of ESSER funds, and the actual items and or services under attendance and social work services that were included in the $75,364 of ESSER funds. The second request was from Dennis Hansen from the Navy Talent Acquisition Group, Great Lakes, requesting for directory information on junior and senior students enrolled at the high school. Secondly, for my report, I provided the board with an update on my goals in my email last week. Information was given for each of those 4 goals, and I just want to provide a summary of those goals to the board tonight. The first goal is to enhance programs and systems to create student learning experiences through flexible and responsive pathways. For clarification, the term pathways is used generically rather than in a formal sense as often referred to by community colleges or in legislation. Our primary focus with this goal is to review our course offerings through 3 lenses: student opportunities, graduation requirements, and flexible learning platforms. Piloting blended classrooms and reviewing our course sequencing and schedule and collaborating with our local community college are key efforts for this goal. The second goal is to promote effectual growth of teachers, staff, and administrators. The field of education is constantly changing and evolving. Professional development has always been one vehicle to help our faculty and staff stay current with strategies and techniques for meeting the needs of our students. Professional development is even more important now with how much has changed due to the 2.5 years of pandemic restrictions. The extra day for new teacher orientation and structuring late start institute and staff development days to include prevailing topics have been instrumental this year in the progress of this goal. Thirdly, creating financial stability and prudently allocating resources for the benefit of the district and school. Each year, decisions have been carefully made to make sure that expenses are within the means of the district's revenues so that programs and facility needs are supported while maintaining a healthy fund balance to safeguard the district against unforeseen issues. This has been especially critical during the pandemic where the economy has been unpredictable and fluid, and to say that we were able to implement the Student Support Initiative, which is the DENS and the academic support, as well as settle two union bargaining agreements with our support staff and our teachers, speaks tremendously to the efforts of administrators, faculty, and staff. The final goal is to develop programs that facilitate a positive school culture and climate, the work of the Wellness Committee to provide adult social emotional activities, and the implementation of DENS and academic support have been both timely and well received by the WeGo community. As I've mentioned before, the progress made for each of these goals is only possible through the team efforts of faculty, staff, and administrators. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. That brings us to Business Services Report.
Thank you. Just a few items for tonight. First, an update on CPPRT. Through January, we have received 99% of the $2.1 million that was budgeted for CPPRT. Last year, we received $1.8 million after that January receipt. So as such, I'm expecting that the Illinois Department of Revenue estimate of $3.3 million for this fiscal year might actually be a low estimate. FYI, on the December CPI was released last week, which came out at 6.5%. So as we know, this will affect our tax levy for next year. Laptops are set to be approved later tonight. The counselors use these laptops for college proficiency testing, especially for those required for entrance into COD. These laptops will not be used only for COD purposes, as they will also be used for various needs throughout the building. Included in the quote is also a spare laptop for the HR department, one for the district treasurer, and a few spares for the media carts. Lastly, an update on food service. At the November 1st Committee of the Whole, we had a discussion with the board about food service options for next year, knowing that whatever direction we took would impact our food service contract renewal. At that meeting, there was consensus that the board wanted to provide appealing meals to students and provide students with autonomy and freedom to purchase their own meals, all while making the application process as simple as possible for families. At that meeting, it was discussed that the best way to accomplish this was to go back to the application-based free and reduced lunch program from a few years ago. We processed this with building and district level administrators, and there was agreement with the board's consensus. With that, we'll be going back to the application-based free reduced lunch program beginning with the 23-24 school year. Given Quest's responsiveness and flexibility during the pandemic, I'll be looking to renew our contract with Quest. That contract will most likely come to the board for approval in March at the latest. Additionally, we will be working with the building administration and staff to review our application process and communication timeline with our families and feeder districts so that any student who needs a free lunch is able to access that service. That concludes my report.
And that brings us to Human Services Report.
Right. First, I want to inform the board that Governor Pritzker has extended the disaster proclamation for the state of Illinois through at least February 5th, 2023. This means that under House Bill 1167, staff members who meet certain eligibility criteria are still able to access paid COVID administrative leave when they or their school-aged children are excluded from work or school for COVID-19 related reasons. This is a practice that we have followed since House Bill 1167 was signed into law in April of 2022, and that we anticipate will remain active for some time. Next, I am pleased to report that the compliance review is well underway. It is certainly a team effort with almost every administrator and many other staff members involved in providing evidence to demonstrate compliance with around 270 individual probes. At this point, we are around 75% of the way through the review process, with a large portion yet to be reviewed by the auditors during the ROE site visit, which will occur on March 15th. Finally, the Wellness Committee continues to offer enriching experiences for all staff members. The committee kicked off the second semester with a high-intensity interval workout provided by the Barcode during the January 5th Staff Development Day. And they have a DIY infused water bar planned for the January 25th Wellness Wednesday event in the staff lounge. Now, this year, the EBC Wellbeing Incentive Program modified their program requirements so that each district can earn points toward the 3 tiers through action-based programs, education and promotion of benefits, committee engagement, and, of course, the flu shot and biometric screening event. For the 22-23 school year, we are on track to have achieved all 15 points needed for the top tier by early spring, which should result in the return of up to 0.75% of our district's projected annualized premium to staff. I'll look forward to reporting back when we have officially achieved Tier 3. And that concludes my report.
Thank you for that report. Principal's report.
Just a few updates tonight. Last week, we invited hundreds of soon-to-be Wildcats on campus for our annual 8th grade open house. Attendance was very high, with standing room only in the Commons. Students and parents heard from the Student Services Department on how to successfully transition to 9th grade. They also had the chance to visit with representatives from all academic departments and every extracurricular team and club. Students were able to sign up for more information on clubs or teams they were interested in. Additionally, this week and last week, our division heads have been meeting with middle school students on their campuses to talk about the opportunities and elective classes they can take. And this week, students and families are meeting with counselors at night and on weekends to discuss their course selections for next school year. I want to really thank our principals from the feeder schools who have done a wonderful job advertising these events and helping us have such high turnout. January really is the official kickoff of the 8th to 9th grade transition, and we are committed to continuing to have a robust transition process. On Friday, February 10th, we will be hosting the Student Leadership Summit for all of our partner Upstate 8 schools here on campus in the LRC. We're really honored to be hosting this wonderful event for our conference, and it will be modeled off of our very successful ROAR program that we have had for years here at WeGo. It's going to be a great opportunity for students across 10 high schools to build connections and share their perspectives on student leadership. Finally, you have our attendance and discipline report in the packet, and that concludes my report.
Thank you for that report. And that brings us to facility naming policy discussion. So we started having this discussion back at the December meeting, and hopefully we have some further discussion on this and maybe reach some kind of a board consensus on whether the board does or does not wish to move forward at trying to formulate a policy that would allow our board and potential future boards to perhaps place memorial plaques and or naming portions of the facility after somebody that was beloved by the community. So at this point, I would open it up to any continuing thoughts on this subject.
My thought is that we had a policy in place back in, I think, 2003, something like that. Shuffle, moving to press, it was modified, and that modification was overlooked. So kind of a error by omission. And my thought is we would go back and institute that policy as it was into the current press, and then after we've done that, we can talk about modifying that policy or changing that policy, but at least bring that back so that we have the integrity of the policy manual. My concern is that if other things also pop up lost in the shuffle and we set a precedent at not going back and fixing the problem when it originated, that we could have problems with other types of policies and other kinds of issues.
Policy that we have that we approved on March.
Well, that
That's
policy.
not the one from 2003.
No, that says something on the effect that if or when there's a request to name of part of the facility, that would go through a committee or something.
No,
Addresses it at
the
all.
policy that's in press right now for the board, and that's, let me just look really quickly, that's policy 4150. That one does not have anything about naming facilities. So as I shared in my update to the board several weeks ago, I did review through the press boilerplate 4150 against ours. And just for review, the boilerplate template from press did have a section about naming facilities. When I went through our press policy 4150, there were some changes made and slight verbiage changes beforehand, and then that section was not included. So previously, I think there was discussion at the board or there was a question as to whether that was overlooked. And if you recall, the practice was when we're transitioning from the old policy to press, several administrators had different sections of the old policy and reviewed it against press to make sure that it carried over. And my guess is whoever had the old 5000 series did review it with the press 4150, and that's why there were some verbiage changes in the beginning, and so that the omission of that paragraph was intentional. But unfortunately, did not include anything to Rich's point, reaffirm the old position. It was just silent.
We basically have nothing right now.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And I think if I remember correctly, too, we were starting to talk about it because it was you and me, and I believe you too, Gary, weren't we talking about this? Because there was some questions coming up, and we were wondering, how do you keep track of things where we've memorialized people in one way or another and things get lost? And I think maybe that's why it got left off, because we were going to develop something, and then the pandemic hit, and we never really finished those meetings.
I don't remember the exact sequence of getting it removed. My opinion was it was not intentional that got removed. I think the intent was to continue that policy. I would have been very vocal about it had we decided to remove it, just because of the issues involved. I think we need to get back to that point that we can have discussions about individual circumstances where you may want to override policy, but I would hate to lose that policy. I think it's just fraught with too many issues, unintentional. You just don't realize what could come of it in the end.
I think we were going to write something up, and then we just never did. So I think we obviously need to do something. We need to either put something within this policy or develop a new policy.
And I guess the old policy basically said, we don't do that. We will not name portions of the building. So this is a good juncture, I think, for the board to kind of reach a consensus. Is that the way we believe? And we want to have a policy, either the old policy with modifications or a brand new policy that says we don't do that? Or does the board wish to craft a policy that allows for that being done? Rather than just take the old policy, put it in, let's get a sense for which direction the board wants to go, and then that would form the basis of what policy ought to be in place.
I think returning the original policy kind of buttons up the integrity of the intent, and then once we've done that, that doesn't mean that we can't change anything, but that sort of becomes the starting point, because had that not been lost in the shuffle, that would be there now for discussion.
Right, but we'd still be having the same discussion. Even if that policy was there, the community would still be coming to us requesting that we consider naming the swimming facility. So even if that policy was there, we'd still be having this discussion.
So this is like a
Policy
fresh
was in there.
start. It's like an opportunity to do what we would like to do now.
So I guess that's what I would prefer to
Yeah,
suggest. We
which
open
I
the
am
discussion.
happy to-
Where does this board wish
I am happy to have a
aim?
policy regarding naming buildings and facilities. And if we want to add it into this current policy, I'm good with that too.
Are you saying you think we should have a policy that would allow for that to happen? And Rich, would you advocate of policy that would allow that, or like the original policy, it would not allow that?
Well, I think there was good reason for establishing that original policy. That doesn't mean way, but I would want to go back to at least step one where we had that policy, because we hadn't really had any discussion along the way at eliminating that policy and what implications that would have.
I think that's what we're starting to lean into now. right? Yeah, the original verbiage, yeah, it's,
Yeah, and I shared with the board the old policy, which is 5,004, our current 4150, and then the press boilerplate 4150. That does
Right.
have the section that does allow facility naming after an individual and a process for that.
Yeah, yeah, I have those, but I mean the one from 2003 that Rich is referring to.
yes, that,
Yes,
he
that's
has
the-
that and it was sent out.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
Gary, your thoughts?
I would prefer to return to the old policy, and we could certainly have a discussion on an individual case, but I think the standard policy ought to be that we do not do this.
Kathy?
I agree with Rich that we should return to that and then have a discussion, allow for a discussion on a case by case, but to go back and have something in place right now before we try and reinvent a new policy when we've got something pending right now where there's. But I think we should go back to that and then have that discussion.
Giovanni?
It leaves a cleaner trail for us.
I think that's not a bad idea, but I think I'm for, having a policy where we can add, naming a facility.
So you're in favor of us having a new policy that would allow that as a possibility?
I agree with Giovanni, that I would like to see that policy allowing us to do that also, but I think just to keep it clean and neat, we should go back to the policy that we had, get it completed and cleaned up as Lynn said, it probably would have been done years ago, and then take that next step. Not just redo it right now in a rush without putting the thought and having an in-depth conversation about the implications that those changes.
Well, I don't think we're doing anything in a rush. I mean, as much as the community has made this request, I don't think the community is expecting a quick answer on that. So I think we can take our due diligence and formulate a policy. I'm not sure I see the benefit in taking the old policy, putting it into the new policy book, and then opening it up and ripping it apart and making adjustments. This is not something where we're being forced into a defined timeline. So it seems like we can do the due diligence and craft a policy and then put that policy in place rather than put the old one in and then modify it.
We can certainly use the old one as a template.
You can certainly take some ideas from it if that's appropriate. Back in December, I felt very much on the fence on this because I could definitely understand the viewpoints from both sides, but giving it a lot of thought and soul searching, I'm really starting to like the idea of allowing for a facility or building component to be named after someone with a time-limited guarantee. So say, for instance, after 20 years, the component could be renamed if a future board felt that was appropriate. So if you name something, you're not guaranteeing that's going to be the name forever, with the understanding there would also be some kind of a suitable plaque permanently placed in that area as part of the process. So that kind of compromises, you can honor the person now but not tie the hands of a future board down the road.
That seems confusing. That would be saying, like, all of a sudden we're changing the name of the Bishop Gym to some other name, and now alumni come to the building and they're trying to find the Bishop Gym, or they're asking about the Bishop Gym. I think if you're going to name something, you should name it and not be changing it every 20 years or whatever. That seems to get into some other issues.
I don't think we're backtracking. I think we're moving forward. So, we're not going to change what's already been done. I think it's just the fact is that it was omitted, and I think this is the opportunity. This is the fresh start. And I also think to say that we'll contradicts who we are. I mean, we're a community high school. So I think this is on the smaller scale of something that we can work with our community and we can consider case by case how we approach this.
I mean, I would think that in a policy to reflect this, there needs to be some criteria. For instance, one possible criteria is the person to be honored would have to be somebody that is deceased as opposed to still living, just retired or something. You could have other requirements to kind of set a fairly high standard for high standard if you want to consider renaming part of the facility, maybe a lesser standard if you want to have a permanent memorial but not renaming. I mean, these are criteria that could be put into a policy.
Should we develop like an ad hoc committee to go through what we feel should be points in the policy? And
something like that would probably make sense.
And even the policy itself doesn't address all the details, the policy that has been in the past, I think, because we would need to have some type of a selection process. And I didn't see that in this policy.
One of the reasons that I guess this is resonating with me, that this is something that we should potentially allow, is, and Penny, you kind of touched on it, community is in the name of our school. And it seems right that if someone has passed on and was beloved by and held a special role for the school and the community, we should have a method to honor their memory when appropriate. Other thoughts? All right, at this point, it sounds like there is a board consensus to move forward with trying to develop a new policy regarding this, quite probably involving a subcommittee. So we'll continue to have this on future agendas as we walk through it. As I said, there's no imminent time restriction on when we have to do this, so let's proceed appropriately and make the right decision. Once that policy is in place, then we can take the request from the community regarding Dan Johnson and apply it to the policy that we've implemented. That sound fair? Okay, then. That brings us to committee and representative reports. Any update from SACID?
Do you have anything? I don't have anything. We were having a joint meeting the end of the month for Board of Control and the governors with SACID. So maybe we'll have something next month.
Okay, that would be good. Future dates. We'll have a committee of the whole meeting on February 7th, a regular Board of Education meeting on February 21st, committee of the whole on March 7th, and a regular Board of Education meeting on March 21st. And that brings us to open comment from board members. Hearing none, that brings us to future issues. Any future issues anyone wants to have addressed? Hearing none, that brings us to consent agenda. Does anyone wish to remove any item from the consent agenda? Hearing none, I would move approval of the consent agenda, which includes approval of the minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting from December 20th, the closed session Board of Education meeting from December 20th, the approval of the financials as listed in the agenda, the second reading, which means final approval of the IASB draft policies that are listed in the agenda, and the personnel report as presented.
So moved.
Is there a second? Roll call, please.
Ms. Casey Mayer.
Aye.
Ms. DeRamus.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz.
Aye.
Mr. Nagel.
Aye.
Mr. Saig.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye. All right, motion carries. That brings us to new business, Chromebooks for 2023 to 2024. The recommended motion is that the Board of Education approve the purchase of Dell Chromebooks and Google. Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer.
Aye.
Ms. DeRamus.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz.
Aye.
Mr. Nagel.
Aye.
Mr. Saig.
Aye.
Motion carries. That brings us to laptop purchase. Recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the purchase of Dell Latitude from CDWG LLC, Chicago, Illinois, not to exceed $38,465.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer.
Aye.
Ms. DeRamus.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz.
Aye.
Mr. Nagel. Mr. Saik.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Right, motion carries. That brings us to architect and engineering proposal for arcade. The recommended motion is the Board of Education approve the proposals from DLA Limited, Itasca, Illinois, and WT Group LLC, Hoffman Estates, Illinois, as presented.
So moved.
Is there any discussion?
How are we going to finance this?
We have a couple of different options that we're considering. If DLA, if we get to the point where we like it, we have a design that we like and we want to move forward, we can either use fund balance or we can look at debt certificates, either short-term 5 to 7 year debt certificate, or again, we can use fund balance.
And just for clarification, this is just a proposal to start the work on preliminary drawings. Nothing has been obviously brought to the board for approval to move forward.
Understand,
Yeah.
but we don't want to spend that initial money if there's
Oh, correct.
limitations on being able to actually
Yes.
do this. So we have a plan.
I had some thoughts on this. I do not feel that this is the right time for beginning a new building project. We just recently completed a major building project. We are intently focusing on helping our students recover from the COVID disruption with a strong emphasis on additional social emotional learning resources. Some of these resources are funded by ESSER funds, which are limited and will eventually run out. At this point, I feel it is wiser to not start a building project and focus on our current priorities. This is a project that can be picked up at a later time if the board feels it's warranted.
And I would just remind the board that when we talked about this in November, one of the considerations for wanting to entertain some concepts for the arcade was the fact that on the second floor for our science classes, we've been running at capacity for our lab classes. And those classes are restricted in terms of room utilization because there are specific lab tables and lab equipment. You can't put those kids in a general classroom, lecture classroom like this. So with that, we have been restricting the number of kids who want to take those science courses during the course selection process. So in other words, if we have a classroom that's a lab class that can only seat 26, and we have more kids that sign up, but we can't accommodate because of the number of sections of that 26 can hold, we have to tell those students to pick something else. And we've been doing that for a number of years just because we wanted to make sure that our enrollment numbers were steady. And so the consideration here is we have students who are moving on and taking more science beyond the 2-year requirement. And as part of the goals and offering opportunities for our students, and that is part of the college and career pathway in the sense is to take those science courses, expanding and having those additional lab classes will allow for more science offerings for our students. That's the primary consideration, as well as the fact that as much as we have added 10-ish classrooms with the new construction, due to new programming and services for our students, we are running up to about capacity with just the room utilization. And that's a good thing because that means we're facilitating the needs of our students through services. And so it is a prime opportunity. And to Rich's question, which is a good question, we considered this only because there were feasible means for us to be able to move forward if the board approved it to fund it.
I think it's unfortunate if the world is encouraging students to be taking more science and getting more involved in that, and we're having to discourage that by telling them we don't have any room right now. I think push for science, it's in the benefit of our community, it's in the benefit of our nation, and it sounds like it's something that is bringing opportunity and benefit to our students.
I'm concerned that the timing is wrong, and that's a lot of money that we're talking about, and I'm very concerned about when ESSER funds run out, how we can sustain the new programs that we put in that ESSER is helping us fund. So I'm not opposed to the idea, I just think the timing is wrong.
I will say with the EBF still coming into the district, we've already considered the when ESSER funds would run out, and with the amount of EBF that we have coming in, I'm not banking on CPPRT to be as high as it has been, and with some of the other property tax revenues that are coming in with new construction and things like that. We've already kind of considered the fact of when those programs would run out, that we would still have funding available to take care of those. And the fund balance that we're talking about utilizing for this project, we're currently at about 58% fund balance. And if we could use a little bit of fund balance to come down to 45% or so, that's how we would plan on utilizing those funds. So we would still have 45% fund balance after the project or so, give or take, depending on some construction contingencies and things of that nature. So that was the plan to begin with.
And I think you said that you expect that we're going to be entering a lower tier for EBF, so that those numbers are not going to be as good as they've been in the past. Is that correct?
Right. Well, we'll definitely come down to EBF the next tier. It might be next year, it might be the year after that. It'll definitely be coming, but we're actually still, with the last few years, receiving $700,000 to $800,000 extra each additional year. I still project that we'll have enough funding in regular operating to cover all of those programs that we implemented with the ESSER funds.
Any further discussion?
It doesn't sound like we'd be looking at doing this in lieu of any of the services that we created using ESSER funds. It's something that would enhance, services we provide to, and obviously a need to the student. Without giving up something else makes sense to me, at least to take it into consideration and look at it.
One thing to Dr. Chang's point, and your point, Mr. Brown, we have added considerable amount of services, but they all have required space. Den time, we literally use every room in the entire school at that time because it's every student every day. And science is by far, because of the nature of it, the most compacted division. No teacher has their whole day in a single given classroom. So often they're prepping a lab in a room and then trying to wheel it in during a passing period. And part of that is to their credit, the science department's credit, that they have grown their enrollment in the years.
I guess I'm still concerned about the timing, and this is very sudden. I mean, this was just suddenly surprise drop to the board in, I believe, November. Guess what? We're going to look at a $4 to $5 million building project. Not a whole lot of preparatory, okay, this is where we're heading and this is why we may be needing it. So again, I'm not convinced of the timing yet.
I guess I would say, in fairness to the situation, we've been talking about the increases in science enrollment in our sectioning process for years. I mean, when we looked at the numbers, we've been talking about how our science numbers have been good, and we were feeling that. As a matter of fact, I know that's a message that I've communicated to Dr. Domaraki. In the sectioning process, we've actually increased, a number of courses within science, and, that piece has been out there. I think at any point when we present an idea, it's going to feel like it was a surprise. But again, all of our communication with the needs of the students and what we've been seeing has been out there to say that they've been taking more science classes. And so this is just part of the natural process of how to meet the needs and the interests of our students. And the opportunity was there based on the projections that Dan has provided each time during the budget cycle, not just with the current fund balance, but also with the anticipated projections of how we're going to be, in the future. So it seems like the right opportunity to explore the concept.
But if this had been watched for a long time, then why wasn't it discussed as part of the prior major building project?
That's a good question.
Because that would be the logical time to dig into it if this has been a long-standing.
Let's remember that at the time, again, I was principal then, but the district already had a major construction project underway. So I can tell you that, and this is the challenge when boards change over the years, is to maintain that history and that sense of communication. But that has been communicated through the sectioning process each year, that our science has been good. That has been talked about as part of just the curriculum development as well. That has come through in some of the course offerings, new proposals that has happened each year. And so that piece is, in terms of just the building the framework of the foundation for the need, that's always been there. I think in terms of the timing, it's simply because we've been talking about the needs of our students, and in going through the sectioning process and looking at the projections, or the funding projections, it seems to be right. So I guess, I mean, I'm not sure how else we would have approached this with all the factors in place that we have right now in a more opportune moment.
I would also consider this to be a first step in the process as we give DLA the okay to start to really dig in and provide the plans and some design and see if those are the things that work for the district and work for the board, which we'll bring back and show those designs and talk about, okay, this is a good design, this is going to benefit the students in this manner. And then as we get into that, then we figure out, we start to talk about which option do we want to use to fund that project. But until we get go through that process with DLA, let them go through this design process to actually see if it's going to benefit us and if we want to go down that direction. So without the approval of this, then we can't even look at the design itself.
Any further discussion?
And let me ask you, the concern is that as we're coming up to the future and losing ESSER funds, that's going to have an impact on things. What is the crossover between building dollars and where ESSER money would be put?
I guess I'm not understanding the question of.
ESSER money is more for operational expenses, not building expenses, right?
Right, ESSER funds we put in place for SSI and things of that nature that we'll spend mainly over the next couple of years with SSI. True.
In the building for activity, I mean operations, not
True.
not
Yeah,
buildings
staffing,
and things.
yeah.
So a concern about the ESSER funds eventually going away really doesn't have any impact on brick and mortar, right?
Right, but we've been able to use a lot of the ESSER funds for things that we probably would have been covering with CPPRT or EBF or property taxes, and we've been able to not use those funds in that manner. And so, as the ESSER funds go away, then we still have those operational EBF, CPPRT, and property taxes that will cover that. While also we've been able to increase our fund balance the last couple of years. And so again, we have a good fund balance currently that we can utilize.
Yeah, and just as a reminder to the board, the ESSER funds, in terms of allowable uses, cover both programs, services, staffing, as well as facility needs such as air handling components, which we've hit each of those areas. And I think throughout the course of last year and this year, whether it was the bargaining process with both bargaining units or establishing the budget or looking at staffing, that's always been the consideration is what can we fund out of ESSER, but how do we sustain that? That's always been the discussion. And to Dan's credit, and in the bargaining process again for Dan and Julie to their credit, the proposal brought forward to the board was always with the ability to, and the mindset to sustain that. I think it would be foolhardy not to do that. And again, this is a proposal to explore the concept. We've been telling kids, we've been backing kids off of science classes for years, and the funding being available as it is in the fund balance seems like it's the right time to at least explore the concept.
It sounds really, really good. I think that you are right as far as definitely supporting students' needs to want to, explore science in that STEM area. But I also do think, to Bob's point, I'm just kind of processing here. And, the one thing I will mention is, we serve a community that definitely has been impacted by a lot of hardship in these last few years, that experience evictions, and that there is less and less affordable housing, or no really affordable housing currently right now in West Chicago. So I do think, to Bob's point, I do think that, what message do we send the community that is experiencing these hardships? And I do think programming is best practice to, service kids through courses and the opportunity to take courses. And we're not saying no to that necessarily, but right now, is it the right time when mental health is at an all-time high, or issues with mental health and other needs that, are plaguing this community currently?
Yeah, and I would say the message that it sends to our community is that we're supporting your kids and their interests even in the toughest of times, but even in the more critical time where we want to prepare them for whether it's career or college right after high school. And that's what House Bill, 3296 is all about, exploring pathways so that kids can have entry points for high skill, high wage, and in-demand career fields. And it is very much science focused. So I think it sends the message that we are supporting your students as much as we can, even the toughest of times. But I want to remind the board that in the last 3 years, I know this is facility and bricks and mortar, but we've added almost 16 FTEs for our kids. And a lot of them in social work, social emotional support. So we're not doing one thing without the other. We're trying to move the entire district forward. And this building is for the kids. That's why we do it. That's why we have a multi-million-dollar facility for band and music and drama. Well, now we want to take a look at science. It's the natural evolution of how we move the entire district forward so that we can offer all of our kids the best opportunities for exploring their options for post-high school.
I think it's been a good conversation because I think everybody makes very good points. The money and the timing and the need. We're just trying in our heads, I think, to balance that out because, yes, is this the right time? Really, in reality, it's always the right time to do more for the students, always the right time. But you do have to worry about messaging and sustainability. And you gave some great answers, Dan, makes me feel more comfortable with going ahead with this. And the fact that it is just kind of scoping it out to see if it's something feasible, and we'll see what the next step brings. But I appreciate the conversation because that way we all have an understanding with what we're up against. So.
Anything further? Roll call, please.
Ms. Casey Mayer.
Aye.
Ms. Doremus.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz.
Aye.
Mr. Nagel.
Aye.
Mr. Sake.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Nay. All right, motion carries. That brings us to textbooks. The recommended motion that the Board of Education authorize the administration to advise the public via website that textbooks recommended for adoption will be on display for 21 days.
Move.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Doremus.
Aye.
Ms. Munoz.
Aye.
Mr. Nagel.
Aye.
Mr. Sake.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer.
Aye.
Motion carries. That brings us to travel. The recommended motion, the Board of Education approve student travel for the Wildcat girls softball team to Murfreesboro, Tennessee from March 26th through March 30th, 2023.
Second.
Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Ms. Munoz.
Aye.
Mr. Nagel.
Aye.
Mr. Sake.
Aye.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer.
Aye.
Ms. Doremus.
Aye.
Motion carries. That brings us to referendum. Approval of resolution calling for advisory referendum at the consolidated general election of April 4th, 2023. Let me put a preface on this. During the last year, there have been several attempts by members of our community to put a question on the ballot that would allow people to voice their opinion on the effect that Winfield TIF 2 would have on our schools and other governmental agencies in our community. Thus far, all of these attempts have been silenced. A member of our community asked our board to put such a question on the April 2023 ballot. This will help our community to understand what is at stake with Winfield TIF 2. If approved, the ballot question will read, Shall Community High School District 94 allow $4 to $6 million of its future tax dollars raised primarily from Central DuPage Hospital's development of Winfield's Town Center to be diverted away from the school district and into Winfield TIF 2, where Winfield intends to use the school district's future tax dollars to develop Winfield's proposed $16 million village hall and police station, as well as $1 million plaza. While this question is legally non-binding, I feel that it will allow our community to finally have a voice on this very important topic. This vote is not about the lawsuit against the TIF or for or against the Village of Winfield. It is about giving our community their voice back. With that said, the recommended motion that the Board of Education approve the resolution calling for advisory referendum at the consolidated general election of April 4th, 2023 as presented.
So move.
Any discussion?
I think we're likely to get people voting for it because they think it's coming from District 94, so it must be in our best interest. It's hard to get people to understand the details and to get people to understand, what the agenda behind it is. I'm concerned that it would possibly send a bad message just because people didn't really know what they were voting for.
Well, this does open up an opportunity for communication. Once, if this is approved, it's out there, then it's up to the community to start talking about what this is and what does it mean and what is it for.
I guess one question I had is, if they reject it, are we going to withdraw our challenge, our court challenge?
I don't believe that's necessarily.
Well, if we're going to ask the residents of their opinion, are we going to take their opinion?
We can have that discussion at that point.
Well, why don't we
certainly.
take that discussion now?
Because it's officially a non-binding referendum, so we can have that discussion. We're trying to give the community an opportunity to put a question on the ballot that they've been trying to and have been shut down so far. So we're trying to use our ability to put it on the ballot because they haven't been able to.
Trying to.
Well, members of the community, and they've been shut down by the Village of Winfield.
Members of the Winfield community or the general D94 community?
Oh,
Both. There have been several attempts to put referenda on the on several ballots in the last year, and they've all been shut down.
Personally, as a resident of Winfield, I find the whole issue abhorrent on the part of Winfield, and do not support it in any way. But I also find non-binding referendums very manipulative to the community. It really doesn't provide any information that educates them on what actually happens. It's not based on any real facts as far as the monetary impact, because we don't know what that will be. And I'm not comfortable with putting the district out there making a statement like that. I just feel like it is a very negative reflection on us. We wanted to go out and talk to people and educate people, giving them opportunities to ask questions other than in the polling place. I'd be all for that. And again, I am very much, I think what Winfield is trying to do is completely unethical. I'm very opposed to it, but it's politics that, Winfield politics that don't belong at the high school board table.
One of the major things that this can accomplish is just to raise the awareness of what TIF 2 is. Even after all the money that's been spent by the village on PR-related things and everything that's been flying back and forth, especially between 34 and the village, there's a lot of people that don't know what is this TIF 2. I've never heard of it. What does it
The
mean?
referendum doesn't tell them that, though.
Yes, it does. It tells them that
does not tell them. It's not based on any kind of factual data.
those numbers are based on factual data.
yes, they are.
Those are based on all of the realistic projections that have been generated
I
through this
disagree,
process.
So that's all I'm going to say is I just think anything like that is misleading and just doing a disservice to our constituents. Moral ground for me. I felt that way when Winfield put their non-binding referendum on. Same thing. It's wrong to do it, it's misleading, and it is not a way to communicate and educate the community.
Well, when Winfield...
It's a way to stir the pot up and make everybody look ugly.
When Winfield put their non-binding referendums on, the purpose for them doing that was to knock off one of the attempts for a community member to put a question on the ballot. So yeah, that was extremely dirty politics on that part.
It was extremely, and a tit for tat doesn't work for me. Well,
I understand your perspective.
So if the answer is no, what does that mean to us? If the answer is yes, what does that mean? They're going to be, well, 80% of the people are going to be voting, saying what goes on in Winfield anyway.
One of the major purposes of this is a communication to the entire community on these people either are fine with it or this amount of people are definitely not fine with it. It's educational so that people are aware of what this impacts of this TIF can have on our schools and the rest of our community. And it's also the ability for the community to have a voice to say, hey, Winfield, what are you doing? You're trying to take money from our schools. It's a chance for them to have that voice.
I understand the hope there. I think most people aren't even going to be aware of this question until they get into the ballot box.
Not necessarily. They can be educated beforehand that this is something that will be on your ballot. There are a lot of groups that go out and educate people about what will be on their ballot before they actually vote. And so this can be one of the items that people will be educated on. But we service Carroll Stream, Warrenville, in West Chicago, along with Winfield. So this is not really just a Winfield matter, and I think that's the idea, is to let people know that this is not just a Winfield matter. They'll drive through Winfield and they'll see that thermometer, and it looks like it's a Winfield matter, and it's not. This affects us. This affects, we want to build, we want new science rooms. 100%, I want new science rooms too. But yet we're going to allow Winfield and let the community be in the dark about the fact that that's millions of dollars that's not coming to our school. I think it's imperative that we inform the public. And we can use that as an example, that we want to move forward and we are turning kids away. We are turning kids away from taking science classes. How is that possible? That just, I find abhorrent, that we are turning kids away from taking science classes because we don't have the room. Well, Winfield wants to build a city hall for millions of dollars that belongs to our students. And if this is what it takes to get the word out, I am more than happy to do this. And I'll go around and I'll knock on every single door and I'll let people know that this is on their ballot and why.
It's also very possible that because of the more unusual nature of this kind of a question, that local newspapers might pick up on this and they might provide some public awareness as well.
Exactly, yeah.
I guess what impact do you feel that an answer to this, what's the hammer here?
It makes it politically more difficult for them to continue their position if there is a large number in the community that says this is not right. Right now, they are trying to portray it as School District 34 is just being stubborn, and they're like trying to portray it as this small, the evil school district is trying to crush our getting a new police station. They don't want to look at the bigger picture of it's more than just District 34. We have a much larger area, most of which is not even in the village of Winfield, that receives no benefit whatsoever from the new village hall and police station. So they would then have to grapple with the fact that there's a lot of people in the community that are now aware of what's going on and are not going to be happy about it.
They're not voters in Winfield. So what you're looking at is people in West Chicago putting pressure on people in Winfield to exert some force.
Keep pressure
So
on
that's going to happen.
the other half of Winfield that goes to Wheaton schools to put pressure on Winfield to say, we want to pay our share because you're only making the west side of Winfield pay for this. the east side is gonna get a new police station, a new village hall, and not pay a penny for it.
That's certainly one of the inequities of this whole thing, absolutely.
Definitely is.
You're
And
right.
then
You're
I
absolutely right.
totally agree with how you feel, and I totally agree with you saying, I'll go out and knock on doors and tell people, up to the point of putting it on a referendum. So I'm not disagreeing with
No, I know. I
anything you say.
understand. Yeah, no, I understand.
I don't believe in non-binding referendums.
This is more than anything else, this is an opportunity because it was extremely dirty politics that several community-sponsored referendums that involve people going out in quite unpleasant weather at times, trying to gather lots and lots of signatures to get something put on the ballot, was just single-handedly knocked away by the Village of Winfield. And so this is an opportunity for our board to answer our community's request, because this isn't just, we thought it'd be a good idea. We were requested by a member of our community, will you consider doing this? This is a chance for us to try to right the wrong of getting it on the ballot so at least the people can see it and have a voice. Because everything else they're trying hasn't succeeded in getting it on the ballot.
I don't support it being on the ballot.
I understand.
So
I
You know, you're
understand.
looking at me like you're gonna convince me.
No, I'm answering your question, that's all.
I didn't have a question. I don't believe in it. That's my statement,
I
not a
understand.
question.
I understand.
Flat out statement. So,
I see both sides, and like I appreciate the discussion. I think I agree with. It's for me. I see it as an educational opportunity, and like I go back to I guess what Rich is saying. There might be people that see it for the first time, and I guess if that's the first time they see it, maybe I like hopes of they will raise an eyebrow and be like, hey, that's a lot of money, and you know hopefully they they get. This is something that's talked about before they get there, but I think I see it more as an educational opportunity. So just another way for them to see this information.
Yes to the referendum, that further reinforces Winfield's ability to do this.
That is the
So that's-
risk.
that's the
There is an
risk.
element of risk there, yes.
And if you look at the way it's worded, it could just as easily go with a yes or a no, because people aren't going to take the time to study it and understand it when they walk into the ballot box.
I thought it was phrased very clearly in the sense of taking tax dollars from the school to build a village hall. That seemed to be fairly clearly spelled out, but
Totally meaningless.
any other discussion? All right, roll call, please.
Mr. Nagel. Mr. Sake.
No.
Mr. Zuniga.
Aye.
Mr. Brown.
Aye.
Ms. Casey Mayer.
Aye.
Mr. Amos.
no.
Aye.
All right, motion carries. And that brings us to the end of our open meeting topics. We will be going to executive session for the purpose of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees. We will not be taking any action after executive session. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Roll call, please.
Mr. Sake.
Aye.